Welcome back again to Cocktails with a Curator. For those of you who don't know me, I am Sarah Burgess with the advancement team here at BMFA, and I am just going to go over a few things before we get started. I want to mention that you guys are used to seeing me if you've been tuning in every week in front of our Dale Chihuly Red Reads. But this evening, I apologize that you have to see the gray wall in my dining room behind me instead. Hope you enjoy. But this week, we are excited to be hearing from Dr. John Henry Rice, who is the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Curator of South Asian and Islamic Art here at the museum. And John Henry will be discussing his process for developing thematic installations in the Indian Pavilion Gallery and talking through several of those miniature exhibitions that are in the works that we haven't seen yet. So thank you, John Henry, for being here. And of course, thanks to all of you for tuning in. It's been such a pleasure to have you week after week for the past 8 weeks. Also hard to believe it's been 8 weeks. And with that, I will go ahead and turn things over to you, John Henry.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. This is my first time being a presenter on a Zoom meeting, so it's a little strange that I can't see your faces. I'm certain my colleagues are working diligently in their offices, whether that's at the museum or their home offices. And the rest of you, I'm imagining quarantining on yachts off some exotic coastline, sandals, gentle breeze. I hope that's your situation. But wherever you are, I'm very, very pleased to be with you. This evening, I'm going to speak with you about one of the curatorial activities that I've enjoyed most during this period of primarily working from home. That is the development of an ongoing series of thematic installations within the museum's South Asian galleries. But before launching headway into that, I have a crucial preliminary. Those regulars among you to this series will know that I have the unenviable task of following my boss, Chief Curator and Deputy Director, Michael Taylor. And while there is slim chance of my matching his erudition or charm, there is one arena that he has left open in which I might best him. And that is, you see, Michael did not even mention his cocktail last week. And the program is called Cocktails with Curators, with the Curator. So I figured I would double down on this cocktail aspect of the program. You will have seen that I sent some pretty meticulous instructions for the creation of a gin and tonic. And now, taking Cocktails with Curator to the next level, I will, yes, make that refreshing beverage live before you, which is why I was positioned where I am. The bar. Those of you on your yachts, quick grab the ingredients and follow along. So a large lowball glass, half filled with ice. A generous portion of lime. This is critical. I cannot stress enough that the thing that people do worst is not use enough lime, in my opinion. So I suggest at least a quarter of a good juicy lime. And you want to squeeze that, not a little, you know, this is not a garnish. This is an ingredient. You want to squeeze it very, very, very well. This is not only to extract all the juice, but also to extract the essential oils from the lime peel. I'm going to throw that in there. Got my trusty bar cloth. Next, I highly recommend, although it is optional, a couple dashes of Angostura bitters. Add that to your glass. Very good. Next, a rather crucial ingredient, the gin. I'm using Plymouth, also highly recommended this evening. And we're going to fill that glass about halfway. It's not as over the top as you think. There's a lot of volume taken up there by ice. lime juice and such. And finally, the tonic, also very highly recommended, Fever Tree. Needs to be cold, needs to be fresh. You need to open it when you make the drink, not that half-filled bottle that's been sitting under the warm bar. To top that up, give it a quick stir. And so those long instructions that I sent in the email invite really are not quite as complicated as they look. I'm going to get rid of this. Close up the bar. And so, the gin and tonic. And now that we have that taken care of, the next important thing is I'd like to do 3 quick toasts. And the first is to the museum's long-awaited opening today. It's been far too long since you've been able to join us in person, and with the measures that we've put in place, I'm certain that when you are ready to return, you're going to feel not only safe, but as always, inspired. And I'm hearing really great things about Sunken Cities. So that's toast number 1. Next, a toast to this fabulous series that's kept us all connected and engaged with the museum. You had Chris, Sylvain, Valerie, Peter, Leo, Sarah, Michael, me. I mean, we've got a pretty talented roster. And we've still got some aces warming up in the bullpen. Colleen is next, the first Wednesday of April. And then finally, this leads me to my 3rd toast. Oh, I didn't drink for that one. There we go. 3rd toast to that internet sensation who has guided us with poise and grace through these weeks of programming and now has gotten me as close as I'm likely to ever come at being on a Food Network program, our MC, Sarah Burgess. Okay.
I'll join to say cheers, thank you.
Cheers. No, thank you.
And now I'm going to go away again.
All right. So, cocktails, check. And now on to the curatorial portion of the program. Frequent visitors to the South Asian galleries will have noticed that in the very center of that suite of 5 galleries, in the so-called Indian Pavilion Gallery, we have for some years now featured thematic exhibitions of paintings and other works on paper. It's a really great space to show paintings with its 2 long walls. And I was supposed to share my screen. I'm going to do that now, so that you have pictures to go along with this. There we go. So that is the Pavilion Gallery of which I speak. Like I say, it's a really great space, a sort of picture gallery for showing Indian paintings and other works on paper. And I hope that soon it's going to become an even greater space when we repaint the sort of Eddie Bauer khaki walls in a sky blue that I think will be evocative of the bright Indian sunlight in which this pavilion once stood. The first few rotations in this gallery after our reopening in 2010 were sort of greatest hits, sort of sampled from our collection. But ultimately, and eventually, I wanted to construct rotations with more depth, to dig deeper into our holdings and to build shows around new acquisitions, and also to expand our offerings through loans to the exhibit and to the collection. The first of these mini exhibitions, and now I just have to figure out how to change my slides. There we are. The first of these mini exhibitions was 2016's Light and Line, featuring 19 beautiful etchings of Indian subjects by early 20th century English etcher Ernest Lumsden, and these were all from the Frank Razor collection. Next was 2017's Captivated by Color, which showcased the stunning Indian paintings collection of longtime VMFA supporter Mimi Wilson Dozier. In 2018, I put up a show largely drawn from the permanent collection, but also with an important loan from Shantaram and Sunita Talagonkar, And this was called Krishna, and the blue-skinned Lord. It explored painting of this beloved Hindu deity. And this spring, just before we closed the museum, we installed Jainism Spiritual Victors, our inaugural showing of a recently acquired set of 24 painted depictions of the perfected beings known as Jinas, who lend their name to the Indian religion Jainism. And with this show, I finally got, you'll see in the lower left corner there, I finally got magnifying glasses installed in the gallery, and they will stay. As I get older, I'm more convinced that they're a great thing to have with Indian paintings. And also very successfully, I think we brought our sublime white marble sculpture of one of these Jinas from our sculpture gallery into the Pavilion Gallery to join the painted images. This show has now reopened and will stay up until probably early summer of next year. And I hope that we will be able to reschedule a circle lecture that we had planned for March 12th. And I think it was the very first of the programs that fell prey to our closing the following morning, I believe. So looking forward, normally I have to start planning these rotations in this space well in advance, usually a year or two out, depending on loans and on the conservation needs of the selected paintings. But our just concluded hiatus from the typical distractions of the office has afforded me a little extra headspace and room time to look ahead, not 1 or 2, but 3 years worth of these miniature exhibitions. And it's those that I'd like to give you a glimpse into today. The first is a project that I've actually been thinking about and working toward for years. It'll be a small show examining one of India's most distinctive and fascinating artistic traditions, one that unites the visual arts, poetry, and music. Paintings depicting the various moods evoked by musical structures called ragas were made in large sets called ragamalas, literally garlands of ragas. These musical modes were personified in both poetry and in the paintings as heroes and heroines in romantic or devotional settings. And they were organized into subsets imagined as families, each headed by a patriarch overseeing a group of wives and sometimes a group of sons. Each familial grouping is associated with a season of the year, and each one forms a cycle tracing an arc of changing human emotion throughout the course of a day. I was inspired to pursue this topic by a dozen or so really wonderful Ragamala paintings already in our collection when I arrived, some of which you can see on this next slide. But in order to more fully demonstrate the complexity of this artistic tradition, we really needed more examples of similarly high quality. And so one of my collecting priorities since about 2012 has been to add more Ragamala pictures to our holdings. Again, some of which you can see here that were more recently acquired. So assembling a critical mass of material to work with is really only half the fun. Then comes the complex process of figuring out how best to configure that material in compelling and instructive ways, and how to arrange them in the gallery. And this process of testing myriad possibilities, thankfully for me, is some of the really fun stuff of being a curator. And luckily, my dining room table approximates the shape of the Pavilion Gallery. So I kind of work old-fashioned. I have these little printouts of the paintings, and I just start arranging and testing different possibilities. You can see there's one arrangement. This is just to give you an idea. Another, and yet another. So after many of these combinations and permutations, the arrangement that I finally settled on, which is this one, will include actually not only our paintings from our collection, but also 3 paintings generously loaned by the Telegoncars. So the really exciting part of this installation that has kept me interested the whole time is that, like the art form that it explores, its presentation will itself be multimedia. So whether it's through your phone, we're working this out, or I think I prefer through actual speakers in the gallery, you will, for a select number of these paintings, be able to hear the raga as you stand before the painting. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples of what that might look and sound like. So this is one of those more recently acquired paintings. This is Bhairavi, the first wife of Bhairava Raga. So in that familial set. Set in late summer or autumn, she, Bhairavi, worships in the morning at a shrine of Shiva. There she is paying her respects to the Shiva Linga. The mood that is evoked is one of devotion, but also expressive of the poignancy of separation. And so there's the painting, and then here's a very short clip of a rendition of Bhairavi Raga, or rather Bhairavi Ragini, the wife of Bhairava Raga. And one other example. So this is Vibhasa Ragini, ordinarily the 4th wife of Megha Raga. Its mood is one of tender intimacy. You see here at daybreak in the monsoon season, a couple sits on a bed and gazing into each other's eyes. And he is shown as Kamadeva, sort of India's Cupid. He draws a lotus love arrow there in his bow, which itself is made of flowers. And the raga, which I hope you can crank up as much as possible. In the raga itself, the vocalist compares him not to Kama, but rather to the deity Krishna. So I cross my fingers that you can hear some of this. Chando Krishna Jugala Baya, Chando Krishna Jugala Baya, Bhora Bhai Angana, Bhora Bhai Angana, Chando Krishna Jugala Baya, Chando Krishna Jugala Baya, Deepak ki jyot bhiki, Deepak ki jyot bhiki, Chandrahu ko chandana, Chandrahu ko chandana, mukha ko. Okay, so no more audio clips, so hopefully you can hear me loud and clear. And we will crank it up in the galleries. I really would like to find a way to play it through speakers. I know we're not supposed to be pressing buttons, but maybe there's some sort of way you can wave your hand in front of a button and have it activate. We'll see. Now for the next of these 3 shows, so after Ragamalas, I intend to offer something completely different. I think it's important to mix things up, to keep the galleries lively. And I've had great success in recent years with folding contemporary art into the galleries, whether that's in Awaken, there you see on the bottom when we use Saren Sherpa's work, or in a installation I did not too long ago in the South Asian galleries called Traverses, which looked at art across a long spectrum of time and places that it was in some way or another associated with Islamic culture. So this exhibition that I'm proposing after RAGAMALAS is of the work of Francesco CLEMENTE. He's an Italian contemporary artist who has worked extensively in India since the 1970s. And there he engaged with the traditional arts and crafts of India. And I studied him in graduate school, and in particular, I studied his seminal India-inspired work called Francesco CLEMENTE PINXIT. You can see on the upper left is the opening page of that. And it's a series of 24 paintings on the pages of an old Indian book. And in their format and in the handling of the painting itself, they're very reminiscent of Mughal period miniature painting. And the crazy thing is that when I was studying this in graduate school, I didn't realize, it was only when I came here in 2008 that I realized VMFA owns this thing that I was studying, thanks to Sydney and Francis Lewis. So since our reopening, I'm showing you all 24 pages here. Since the reopening in 2010, I've really always wanted to show these fascinating works in the South Asian galleries. And now I'm so thankful that Valerie has generously granted me that wish. And so I'm really excited to show this work. Happily, it's the perfect size for the Pavilion Gallery. I don't have to do all those endless permutations and combination exercises like with the RAGAMALAS. There are 24 pages, 12 on each wall. There you have it. So easy peasy there. Much of Clemente's imagery is intentionally enigmatic, attempting to explain it can sort of quickly lead one down the rabbit hole. So unlike some of my installations, I intend to keep the verbal didactics for this one rather succinct until that, the idea that less might be more here and let the paintings largely speak for themselves. But there are fascinating, I'll have to do that to some degree because I'll want to talk about the Indian inflections in it, but I'm going to try to keep that and really let the works shine. In any event, I'm sure this is going to be as refreshing, thought-provoking, maybe a little eyebrow-raising installation in the middle of the South Asian galleries, and by then hopefully on those blue walls rather than the khaki ones. And then finally, looking 3 years out from now, I will turn back to sort of more traditional Indian painting show in which I'd like to dig further into an ubiquitous theme in Indian painting, and that is love and longing. You might recognize this theme as RAGAMALAS, which we discussed, certainly engage it. But this installation will look more broadly at the literary and artistic developments of the 16th to 18th centuries at the courts of northern India, in which poets were commissioned to compose grand works in the vernacular languages that examined, among other subjects, love in its various forms and stages. So in turn, from the poetry, painters who were also patronized by these courts translated these poetic images into visual form. And so at this time, or over this period, there was a sort of explosion of pictures illustrating lovers and love's vicissitudes. So yes, there will be a few RAGAMALAS paintings folded into this, but they'll be different than the ones in the previous show. Sorting those out was kind of interesting. But most of the paintings will be illustrations from other literary works describing the many types of lovers and charting the evolutions of sentiment. So, like other Pavilion Gallery shows, this one, I'm showing you a variety of some of the images that will be in there, but you see this one in the center has remained the same. Like some of these other shows, this one was inspired and in fact built around a recent acquisition that will be unveiled for the show. And this is this monumental lyrical masterwork depicting the late summer rainy season, when the annual monsoon rains return and the world bursts with life. This was part of a poetic cycle of paintings based on poetry that describe the pain of separated lovers and their eventual reunification. And this painting, which is really fabulous and is being conserved in advance of this show, came, just a little tidbit, it comes from the collection of Nobel laureate for literature, V.S. Naipaul. So it has an interesting provenance as well. This show, this one being the one that 3 years out, I'm still in the process of doing sort of table sorting that one, which I guess I can now do at home and also back on the big tables in the office. In addition to that centerpiece Naipaul painting, there are at least half a dozen other recent acquisitions that will feature in the show for the first time. They include a couple very important early paintings that I'm particularly excited about getting to show. These are they. I'm also, I don't know if Mimi Dozier is on the line, as it were, but I also hope to get a couple key loans from her. So, and this is the first she's hearing. So, but those of you who know Mimi know she's very gracious and won't mind my doing that. Like I say, though, this show 3 years out is still, very much a work in progress, and in fact, one of many works in progress. But that is what is going to happen in the medium future in this space in the Pavilion Gallery, and I would love to take any questions. Sarah?
Thank you for that. Lots of exciting things to look forward to. We have a couple questions. I think I'll start with some that we received ahead of time. Let's see. Okay, so obviously you were speaking mostly about the Pavilion Gallery specifically, but could you talk about some other changes planned for the South Asian galleries as a whole, if there are any notable installations coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. There are other changes afoot. Probably the most significant one is in the so-called Late Indian Gallery, a gallery which actually some years ago I renamed through a text panel, renamed it the Colonial and Post-Colonial Indian Art Gallery. We have been planning for some time a major overhaul in there. It was supposed to happen this summer, and now we'll see. Obviously, that was pushed back. But that's going to be a major sort of renovation in there. That period, that sort of later colonial and post-colonial period is an area that I've particularly focused on in acquisitions over the last many years. And so there's a lot of great new material to put in there. There is the sort of centerpiece of the accent piece, as it were. The centerpiece is going to stay the same. Our wonderful Indian howdah, the silver elephant throne, will stay in the center of the gallery. But then the northern wall of that gallery is going to feature this absolutely mind-numbingly beautiful and cool scroll painting which we've actually had in the collection since, I believe, 2009. It is 50 feet long and a couple feet tall. And so we're finally going to get a big wall case built for it, and we'll be able to show 10 or so feet of it at a time in that case. So that's going to be the big new feature in there, as well as some wonderful blingy. There's a silver chandelier that we acquired a few years ago. That's also going to be lots of fabulous things in there. That's going to be a major renovation. After that, I'm hoping that the Himalayan Gallery will also receive a sort of makeover. It's that Himalayan Gallery, which is sort of the last one that people walk into when they walk through the South Asian galleries, was the last one that we worked on right before opening the museum, and we never really finished building it out exactly the way we wanted. So I'm hoping we might get back to that. That, of course, will coincide with a lot of the Himalayan material coming back after Awaken, which is still in San Francisco, shows there, and we're hoping that there is going to be another venue for that in the spring. So it would be great when bringing all that material back to have sort of spruced up space.
Great. A few good questions related to particularly the works on paper and conservation. So we can just, would you say that these are, the works on paper are well preserved? Have they undergone conservation at BMFA already?
Yeah. Of course, the works are in varying degrees of preservation. That's just the way it is. We have made purchases recently of things that are remarkably well preserved, and other things that are less well preserved, including that big Naipaul piece, which is requiring a good amount of conservation. Because I'm not a conservation scientist either, so what I know is sort of filtered through our wonderful works on paper people at the museum. But yes, pretty much everything we show, whether it's been in our collection since the late 60s, which was the sort of genesis of the South Asian collection, or whether it's something that's come in more recently, everything is examined by our conservators before we can put it up. That's one of the reasons I have to work so far out in planning these shows, is I have to vet my lists with Sam Sheasley, who's our head of paper conservation. And so everything is examined, and some of the things are in great shape. They've been previously conserved and they're still in great shape. Other things need a little work, and other things, some things that have never been out still need a lot of work. So they are fragile things. As folks know, paper itself deteriorates over time. It's not a great, I don't know the correct term, substrate or paint. When you put brittle paint on flexible paper, the paint often gets damaged quite easily. So yes, it's everything goes through conservation, and of course the reason that we do these rotations is that we're trying to limit over time the cumulative light exposure on these items. The more light they get, the more they deteriorate. It's just the way it is. So the more frequently we can rotate things and have them rest in dark storage, better.
And as it relates to the scroll painting you mentioned, what is the reason for only displaying a portion of it at a time? Is that related to conservation or to space in the gallery?
It is. It will both, but primarily conservation, because again, it's not on paper, it's on cloth. And again, I'm not a scientist, but my understanding is that that light will still continue to have effect on those pigments, if not the support, in the way that paper is so badly affected by light. But yeah, it's to limit the exposure. So our idea is if it's about 50 feet long and we show about 10 feet at a time, then we're sort of building in a rotation schedule of 1 to 4, you know, of any particular part of it being shown, you know, for 1 unit of time, and then essentially being in the dark, rolled up for 4 more units of time. I am very keen to at some point show the whole thing, and in fact I have sort of long-term planning, have been thinking about building a special exhibition, probably something the size of the Evans Court Gallery rather than the downstairs, but a special exhibition around this scroll painting. It truly, I mean, I cannot overestimate what an important object it is. It's when we finally are able to display it, and when I finally hopefully publish something about it, I am confident that it's going to be considered one of the sort of real monuments of South Indian painting.
Incredible. Well, we're looking forward to that. And that's actually a nice segue to another question. I know it seems like you just finished with Awaken and you've been working on these miniature installations, but are you thinking about your next major exhibition? Sounds like the answer is yes.
Yes, I'm thinking, and in fact working to toward a couple ideas. And one is that that exhibition to be built around the scroll painting. Exactly how to frame that, I'm working on. To some extent, it will be framed in the fact that it's a narrative, and it's what I call sort of a performative painting. It was meant to be displayed, and have the story that it depicts, have that be told in front of a live audience, both, you know, through recitation, but then through music and dance. And so the story is acted out as it slowly unrolled in front of the sort of cast group whose sort of mythic history it tells. So one angle is narrative painting, performative painting traditions in India. Another sort of more narrow angle, but which could become interesting, is that the story that this scroll tells is of this cast of, and this relates to our cocktails with the curator. It tells the mythic history of this cast of toddy tappers, a group whose historic profession is to climb up these palmyra trees and tap the sap out of them, into which is then used to make a sort of mildly alcoholic, frothy beverage called toddy. But then also could be distilled down into a spirit called arak. And there are depictions of this happening, of course, in the story. So one angle of this could be to look at I don't know. I mean, it's the gin and tonic talking, but drinking in India or in India, or I don't know, something like that. But that is one project that I have been thinking about for quite a while. Another more recent project, which is something that I'm working on. I've barely shared this with anyone else, so don't mark your calendars. This won't necessarily happen. But I have been talking with the artist, the contemporary Nepalese American artist who had 3 works in the Awaken show, and he came. Some people will remember, for a week during that show, did paintings demonstration. I think we did a couple public programs. Wonderful guy, amazing work. I've been talking with him about the possibility of doing more with him and his work and showing it. So that's another sort of thing cooking, and that I'm certainly interested in working toward, and we'll, you know, see where it goes.
Great. Another good segue, you're setting these up perfectly. Thinking about Saren's work And you mentioned the CLEMENTEs going in the Pavilion Gallery. Could you talk a little bit more about your philosophy around including contemporary works in the South Asian galleries? And someone has specifically asked about the potential for including photography.
Yeah. Well, my thinking on this has and continues to evolve. When I first came here, you know, I sort of, you know, coming out of a graduate school art history program in South Asia, I had colleagues in grad school that did modern contemporary, but they were they, and I was me, I. So when I first came here, I really didn't think it was my charge to deal much with modern and contemporary. That has evolved over time, and it's, you know, it's taken me sort of a little while to open my eyes to the possibilities that affords. You know, not just to present the newest, greatest thing that's happening, you know, in the South Asian contemporary art world, but to use that in a way that it will in various ways inform or help us sort of understand more about, you know, the history of art in India, and so I like these sort of juxtapositions and dialogues between older material and newer material. You know, and the connections can be through medium, you know, they can be through technique, they can be through subject matter, they can be sort of through historical awareness and identity. Lots of interesting things to do with modern contemporary work. And so I have moved from, oh, I'm not interested, to dipping my toe in, seeing how fruitful that's been, how well it's been received by audiences. A story, I was in a meeting several years back now, and Bill Royal, who I think everyone knows passed away recently, sadly. But he was in the meeting, and he challenged me. You know, this was back when I was sort of a little more fuddy-duddy about it. And he said, well, I think you should only be collecting contemporary South Asian. And okay, I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but I really am positive about folding more contemporary work in with the historical work, and I think it's a really rich avenue.
Great. Someone has asked if you could talk a little bit more about the pavilion itself, when we acquired it, where it comes from.
Yeah, sure. It predates me, so I'm going on my memory, which folks who know me is pretty shoddy. But I think that our acquisition date for it was 2005. I could be off. I came in 2008. It's an interesting story. When we entered into talks to purchase it, it was actually already in Virginia. It had been bought through a London art dealer by some .com billionaire whose name or company I can't remember, but a guy in Northern Virginia, somewhere up around Dulles. And he apparently had bought it with the idea of putting it up in his office, something like this. This is the story as received, who knows. But apparently when it was shipped to him, I mean, I'm sure it was in rough shape already. But apparently so the story goes, when it was shipped to him, it was shipped to Washington. And somebody messed that up, and I think it went to the port in Seattle. So I think it was probably already in rough shape, and then had to survive a truck journey across country, and I think got even more broken up in all its pieces. And so anyway, he started trying to have it cleaned and restored and assembled, and realized what a pain it was. And then he went back to that dealer in London and said, can you find anybody else who might want this? And that's how we heard about it. it's unclear to me when it came out of India. I don't know. And it's also, I can't tell you for sure where it's from, but I spent a long time trying to figure that out, and really, there are no inscriptions on it. Of course, there are the materials that are used, but based simply on the style of the architecture, I think that it probably came from a particular area in Rajasthan, not too far from the Taj Mahal, an area called Bhaktapur. There are other pavilions that are still there that are stylistically quite similar. What we have is not a whole piece. It's not a whole piece, and it's not a complete piece. It is clearly a pastiche of several buildings. You know, it has a history. There are parts of that are 17th century, and there are parts of it that are 19th century, and there are parts that are all in between. It's this pastiche. And of course, it's not complete either. You know, we lack the whole superstructure. But it's such a great sort of evocative thing. The first battle that I fought and lost here was to allow people to walk through it. You know, because I feel like architecture is something that should be experienced. But the conservators were not having that. But anyway, even just as a backdrop, I think it's such a wonderful sort of scene making thing.
That's a beautiful space. Let's see. One person has asked, again, obviously they are approximate, but for the tentative dates for the miniature exhibitions in the Pavilion Gallery.
Sure, yeah. So we've been trying to work on basically an annual, that's an annual rotation. And so the giant installation that is in there now was open in the spring, but it was literally open for 3 or 4 days, I think, before we closed. So I'm sort of considering that as now having opened in July. So I'm imagining that being up through the coming fiscal year. You know, of course, we always have to figure out when folks are available to do major rotations. But let's say basically that's up for the next year. You know, till next summer, and then RAGAMALAS then for another year. So we're going summer to summer here. So RAGAMALAS might open in summer of 21 and CLEMENTE in summer of 22. I hope I'm doing my math right. And then the Love and Longing in summer of, I've already forgotten, what's that, 23? But yes, basically year cycles, with the big caveat that these things change a lot.
Great. Let's see. Someone has asked if India has similar laws as Europe about the removal of antiquities and the repatriation of objects. And understanding that there are many things we don't know about the pavilion, do we think that it would be at risk of being reclaimed?
Sure. Yeah, India has had cultural property laws for a long time, and they've been updated over the years. I think and somewhere I have a file on this because it's quite complicated, but I think, you know, it goes back to, they were British laws. But, you know, I think the first ones are in maybe the 1930s, but yes, they have continued to be updated over the years. Of course, India is a signatory to UNESCO convention as well. So yes, there are a lot of laws on the books concerning cultural property and repatriation. There has been relatively little of it to happen, you know, relative to places like Italy or Egypt. But it could certainly, you know, pick up steam at any point. And like I think is our position with all of our collections, you know, if anyone were to make a credible claim, I'm sure we would take it very seriously. The pavilion, particularly, like I say, I mean, I think it's a sort of pastiche kind of object anyway. I mean, certainly if it were stolen, certainly if it or its parts were taken out illegally, of course we would address that. If someone were to try to make a claim that it's a real sort of heritage, cultural, important cultural property object, I think it would be a difficult argument to make. So if we were in that gray area, I think we'd certainly be safe. But of course, if evidence were brought to us that it wasn't kosher, then we would discuss that. It would just so anyone who's interested in having that thing knows, it would be a hell of a thing to get out the door. It is literally in two pieces. There's a basin in the middle of it, which once held water and had a little bubbling fountain. Monolithic piece of stone, maybe 4 feet by 3 feet. That's one piece. And then the rest of it has all been conglomerated, basically concreted together into a single piece. So it would, for us to get it out of that gallery, we would literally have to saw it up into pieces. So whoever wants it needs to take that into consideration, that they're going to need a lot of saws and U-Haul trucks.
Right, quite the process. Let's see. A few people, well, we have about 5 minutes left, so maybe this is a good one to kind of wrap up on. To me, in my mind, these two questions could be kind of related. Someone has asked or has stated that Indian art often looks very different to Western eyes. And do you have some general comments or guidelines for looking at it? And then similarly, how did you become interested in this area of study?
Sure. In terms of guidelines, I would just say be open, right? Don't prejudge the stuff just because it is different. More, or perhaps to the chagrin of some of the editors at the museum, my labels are quite long, so there's a lot in there to help you understand what you're looking at. But I think it's the basic advice is, be open. Yes, it's different. A lot of things are different, and ideas of beauty, ideals of beauty, vary quite a lot between cultures. But it's something you just have to sort of be open to and acclimatize yourself to. Very, very rich in terms of well, history certainly, but in terms of religious history, a great number of Indian art objects are relate to religious cultural practice. So yeah, it's a lot to learn. It's complex material, but it's fun. The other thing, so there's the approach of, well, read the labels. It's going to tell you a lot. There's the other approach is, what? Just look and find what interests you in it and latch onto that and explore that further. And you may try that and you may find you're not interested at all, and that's perfectly fine. But, go in and just see what it does to your eyes and your brain. So those are two, maybe not conflicting, complementary ways to approach Indian art. How did I, by chance? In college, I was pretty sure I wanted to do art history. I'd done some in high school and was really drawn to it. I'm very much a visual thinker, as much as I think. But I need to see things. That's why I need to spread them out on the dining room table that's over there. was pretty sure I wanted to do art history. I was also pretty sure that I didn't want to do what everyone else was doing, which at that time, a long time ago, was, well, modern and contemporary, which is still hot, but then Renaissance, which is not as hot anymore. But I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. So, you know, I signed up for Art of South Asia from, no, it was called Art of South Asia until 1300 or something like that. And I will admit, I think I was a sophomore. I didn't even know what South Asia was. The first thing that the professor did was show a map. And, you know, I'm an idiot 19-year-old. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because I, like so many people, I think, don't recognize the distinction between South Asia and Southeast Asia. So in my mind, I was about to take a course on Cambodia and Laos and Thailand, et cetera. And I was like, oh, so it wasn't like I had some deep-seated love of Indian art, but it came, and that's, you know, and that ties back to that first part of the question is, you know, of course I had to do it. I had to get a decent grade, but you know, you start looking and you start feeling and you start really getting into things, and you know, so it probably could have been almost any area of art history, but it's just something I fell into and started going to India and couldn't stop. Snowball.
Great, thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to share all of that with us. We are just about at 6 o'clock, so I think that we'll just go ahead and wrap up.
Well, thank you. And thank you whoever's still out there.
They're still here. They're still here.
On their yachts.
With that, cheers. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.